All right, good day, everyone. Welcome to Faith Seeking Understanding. I am Alan Bevere, your host. I am a pastor, retired, a professor, a Bible moth, a stranger and exile in a foreign land. Yes.
Absolutely.
And I am the self-appointed uh, chair of what am I the self-appointed chair of?
Yeah.
Podcast theology and culture. Here at Faith Seeking Understanding University, a completely fabricated institution of higher learning, but where all seekers are invited to ponder profound things. And we have the Grand Poobah Chair of Economics and Public Theology here at FSU, Michael Cruz. Michael, how goes it over in Kansas City, Missouri?
It's wet, it's getting colder, but it's turning into a nice fall. So,
Yeah, we're getting the rain from Melissa.
yeah, that's right.
And last night it started, and today is supposed to be the day of rain. Tomorrow there's still rain, but it's supposed to get better.
Yeah.
We're finally hitting fall temperatures. We had an unusually warm. Well, actually, they're not unusual anymore. We had a warm autumn. So
Yeah,
anyway,
we do.
hey,
Yeah.
real quick sports. So the
Yeah.
Browns, hey,
Yeah.
we're brown. We're Browns. We're the Browns. So we're acting like it. I feel badly for our defense because our defense is pretty good.
Yeah.
And Miles Garrett was wanting to leave at the end of last year because he wants to go to a team that can contend.
Right.
We convinced him to stay, that they were going in the right direction, and obviously our offense is not good. I think unless they find a way to end strong, I think Stefanski's gone the end of the year.
Okay. Yeah.
I think they have been patient with him, patient with the process, particularly over the Deshaun Watson stuff. And Jimmy Haslam was part of that. So I think and Stefanski showed enough promise early on that, and I was fine with that, but I think he's gone.
Hmm.
And there's somebody put a list on social media about all the former quarterbacks the Browns are still paying. It's not a
Not
positive
a good thing.
it's not a positive testimonial, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, how about your Chiefs?
Yeah. After those first two or three games, we were beginning to wonder what's going on here, but it seems like they got all the cylinders hitting on the way they're supposed to. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think they are just getting stronger. This may be one of their strongest teams they've ever had.
Well,
So
good. Good for
we'll see
them.
what happens. Yeah,
So you guys may be watching football in January where I won't be. So, well,
yeah,
I will be, but I won't be as
yeah.
connected to
Well,
it.
not
Yeah.
your team. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and real quick, the World Series. Blue Jays
yeah,
are in the driver's seat. They
yeah.
go to
Didn't expect that.
Toronto. Last two games, they have to just win one.
Yeah,
There's been some excitement there.
there has.
Some
It's been
good
fun.
play. Yeah, some really good play, and a couple of really atrocious calls on a part of the umpires. But
Yeah,
um, that one about the strike the other night, I don't know if you saw that,
yeah,
where it was ball three and maybe strike one, and the pitch was thrown. It was high. It clearly
yeah,
was high.
yeah,
And the ump didn't make a call, so he thought it was a walk. So he starts going to first base, and then all of a sudden the ump puts his finger up that it's a strike. They
yeah.
got the guy on first base out because he was going to second.
Right.
And they
Yeah,
didn't reverse that. They didn't
yeah,
reverse that,
yeah,
and that was the game the Blue Jays lost by one run.
yeah.
Because
Exactly.
then later on in the inning, they got runs, and had he still been on, they'd have scored a run. So
Yeah, umpires need to be quick on the draw for those.
they
You
need to
need,
do this.
yeah, if people are making decisions based on what they do. So,
It was
yeah,
particularly that one was egregious. This was not like missing a close call.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
Alrighty.
All right. So today is due process. What is due process and why does it matter? This is an important conversation for us because we are currently in the midst of a presidential administration for which due process is in the way in reference to what they want to do, and they are ignoring it left and right. So let me just start with a couple things here, and then we'll talk. This is the definition of due process. This is according to the International Rescue Committee. So their definition is due process is a fundamental right guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. It protects people against arbitrary government decisions and ensures fairness in legal matters. Both citizens and non-citizens in the U.S. have the right to due process, a chance to defend their rights, and to have a fair hearing. So that's the definition. Now, let me uh, read the appropriate from the Fifth and the 14th Amendments on due process. So the Fifth Amendment says, um, no one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And then the 14th Amendment, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privilege or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Now, what's important about that amendment is that it clarifies it's not just citizens, any person who basically is encountered by American authorities has a right to due process. And the Supreme Court, by the way, has upheld this more than once. And in fact, the Supreme Court back in April upheld this. And the
Right.
justices, in their opinions that they wrote, had a little bit of disagreement over what due process means for non-citizens. But they all said all people are entitled to due process.
Right.
So where we are is an administration that is completely stepping all over due process with immigrants just being kidnapped off the street by Donald Trump's, who I like to call the American Gestapo, ICE, the ICE Stapo, just being kidnapped off the streets, thrown in detention centers, don't have any now some of them end up getting hearings, but a lot of them do not. The one thing that when Alligator Alcatraz was closed down,
Right.
there were 1,000 people. I don't remember how many were there. It was more than 1,000, but of all the detainees, 1,000 of them have gone missing. They're
Yeah.
gone, and nobody can find them. Families don't know where they are. Their lawyers don't know where they are. They can't get any information from the government. They've
Yeah.
just disappeared.
Yeah.
Now, I do not know in what universe that is close to remotely acceptable morally.
Right.
Just don't know it. And so this is a very serious thing because as people keep saying, if they can deny due process to some people, they can end up denying it to all of us.
Sure. Right.
There's
Yeah.
nothing that is going to keep them from just accusing us of something and declaring us guilty.
Yeah. Right. Becomes ever more difficult to make it apply in other circumstances when you weaken it in one. Um, yeah. Yeah. And I think the thing that you mentioned, the two amendments, both of them do say no person as opposed to no citizen, which person means anybody. And I think it's also important to emphasize that in the Bill of Rights, yes, the Fifth Amendment is the one who talks about due process, and there's you listed the one clause in there that talks about it, but it has a much lengthier statement about things that must be done. And the Sixth and Seventh Amendments that follow up on that are about jury trials and how those are supposed to proceed. I mean, where it was due process is right at the very center, right at the core of what it meant to create America and what America supposedly aspires to be.
Yeah,
And if you are not rock solid on preserving due process for people, then you're not American.
yeah.
I'm not saying you're right, wrong, bad, or good. You're just not American
Due
because that is
process
at
is
the core of what American is having due
Yep,
process.
and the founders put this into the Constitution because they had lived in a world where due process was not followed or
Right,
always followed,
right,
and they wanted to make sure that that happened.
right.
So it is a very American thing
Yes, that's
to
right.
do.
You had the divine right of kings
Yeah,
in Europe, and it's one of the odd things of history that we end up having different meanings for what it means to be conservative and what it means to be liberal.
Right.
In Europe, when you talk about conservative parties, you're usually talking about the monarchist parties. Those are the ones that are conservative. In the United States, because we formed on this idea of rule of law and due process and no governing monarchs and that type of thing, that is our founding base. To be conservative, supposedly, is supposed to mean to uphold those things
Yeah.
because that we're conserving what our founding basis was.
Yeah.
And it's classical liberalism. So the terms liberal and conservative get all muddled together, and it's difficult to understand. But I think right at the very core of it were the issues that we were having with England at the time with the Revolution. And yes, colonists exaggerated some things. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about colonists having been purely pure as the driven snow and all their motives and everything that they did. But at the very core of that was the idea that there would be no monarchy and that the government would be limited. And central to the limitation of government was the idea that we had due process,
Yeah.
that they couldn't just arbitrarily deprive people of life, liberty, or property without people having the opportunity to be able to address those.
Yeah.
And I'll just say one thing further that I think one of the pieces of brilliance in the American Constitution, and then that I think spread to many other philosophies of government elsewhere around the world. There are at least two critical things. One is the idea of free and fair elections. If you have free and fair elections, you can advocate for your cause. You can try to get people in power that agree with your cause, and you can lose. But that means 2 years later, you get another run at it. So the idea is that the question is never finally decided. You have the opportunity to be able to do that. If you do not have free and fair elections, then your only recourse, according to many, would be then you have to engage in violence in order to seize control of the government because you can't get it through peaceful, fair means.
Right.
So the idea of having free and fair elections is number one. Number two, due process. The idea that when you are being charged with a crime, you're being threatened with being deprived of life, liberty, or property, that you have a means for being able to present evidence, to present your case to somebody who's relatively supposed to be impartial to make a determination as to whether the government's justified. That makes people more willing to comply with the laws and to obey authority because they know they have recourse if there's a problem. You erode elections, you erode due process, you end America.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the end of it. So there's nothing conservative about what these conservatives are talking about that are
Yeah.
trying to diminish
Yeah.
due
Exactly
process.
right. There's nothing conservative. I mean, I've said for
Yeah,
years because I would have some people because I'm obviously very critical of Donald Trump. I've had people
right.
call me liberal, and I say no. I said my problem with Donald Trump is he's not conservative.
He's not a
That
conservative.
he isn't.
He's an authoritarian.
He's an authoritarian.
Yeah, yeah,
And again, the great irony. You and I were talking about this before we started, and that is the things that Donald Trump and his movement oppose are the very things that made America America in ideal as far as ideas,
right.
right? That there's no king, right? And to call no kings, as Speaker Johnson did, no kings anti-American is just so much irony. I mean, I've been saying for some time, MAGA is where irony goes to die,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And
Yeah,
so it's no kings is anti-American. We've got no due process, arguing that citizens aren't entitled to it,
right.
which is again not in the Constitution. And then also the undermining of elections. And it is the MAGA movement that attempted to violently overturn an election.
There you go.
These are
Yeah,
the things that are really anti-American.
right,
And yet they have so inverted all the definitions, up is down and right is wrong and wrong is right and vice is virtue, that you've actually got people who are lost in this MAGA abyss, as I call it, who actually think they're preserving all of this, but when what they're doing is stepping all over it.
right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem here is, and I keep saying this and I keep saying this, and I really hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
It gets worse before it gets better.
Hmm.
Um, and I think you see, for example, next Tuesday's election day, and Trump has already said he's going to send election monitors to Delaware, I want to say, and another state, a blue state. Just and
Yeah.
what's and because he
Maybe.
doesn't trust them.
Yeah.
And of course, this is what some are saying is a test run
Right.
for the next election, where the congressional election,
Right.
where he will send monitors into key places in order to hopefully intimidate Democratic voters out of voting.
Right.
Right. Um, and and that is, to me, that's an interruption of due process. Because
Yeah.
people are given the right to vote,
Right.
the states make rules for how voting is done, and yet he is working to intimidate. Now, one of the things that needs to be said real quickly here is we have plenty of examples in American history in 2 centuries of due process not being followed, particularly when
Absolutely.
it comes to minorities,
Yeah.
uh, immigrants, indigenous folks, who will be very quick to tell you that they have been on the wrong end of due process
Hmm.
more than once. And we can't deny that, and we have no stake in denying that. We must own up to it. But I think Martin Luther King Jr. had the right idea when he basically, what his work was about was to say, we have these ideas in the Constitution, right? All
Right.
men are created equal. We have not lived up to that.
Right.
We've got these great ideas that we have not lived up to it. And Martin Luther King says, let us be like our founding documents are.
Yeah.
Let us live up to these ideas. I think so. I think King challenged Americans to live up to those high ideals.
Right.
So we admit freely that these things have not always been followed, but the ideals are there, and they're there for us to aspire to and to continue to do better.
Right.
What we see now is not a poor attempt to live up to the ideals,
Right.
but the destruction of the ideals, the
Right.
stepping on the ideals,
Right.
and that is not a recipe for a free society.
Right. There was one military person, I can't remember his rank or what his position was. I was reading this last week, who resigned his position, and I can't remember exactly how he worded it, but something to the effect that the president is not trying to figure out how to get done what he needs to get done within the Constitution. He's trying to figure out how to test the Constitution
Yeah,
at every step to figure out what he can get away with.
yeah,
It's he's trying his best to not live in a constitution. What was it back in May or somewhere? Something. One of the reporters asked him what he thought of, if he would follow due process, and rather than, well, of course I would. I'm American president. I support the Constitution. I'm here to protect and defend it. No, instead of that, it was, I don't know. I don't
yeah.
know if I would or not. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And
So
he
it's
he believes as the president, he's got the sole authority.
right.
You talked about that I think it was the admiral of the Southern Command retired.
Yeah.
And part of why he retired was because he was in charge of the area where these boat strikes are now happening,
Ah, yeah, right.
which was very much opposed to, because Rand Paul has had the courage. Uh, some of these politicians must have removable spines, because every now and then they stand up to the president, but then they
It
remove them
disappears.
again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Lindsey Graham's spine is long gone.
Yeah.
But he stood up and said, look, this is extrajudicial murder.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
because due process means, what we've done in the past is, if we suspect a boat is carrying drugs, depending on where it is in the water, it's either the Coast Guard or the Navy. They board the ship and they search.
Yeah.
And if there's no drugs, they go on. If there are
Right.
drugs, then there are arrests and confiscations.
Yeah.
In
Prosecuted.
other words, it's due process, right?
Right. Right.
But Trump and Pete Hegseth, I can never pronounce his name, Hegseth, are cosplaying Rambo,
Yeah.
and
Right.
is what they're doing. And
Yeah.
and so and they don't care. So we've got 57, I want to say the numbers now, 57 people who've been killed in these strikes. And nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows whether they're guilty or not. In fact, there are some reports coming out of Colombia of at least a couple of these boats were fishing boats,
Yeah, right,
which doesn't mean they're not carrying drugs.
right.
But, you've got people one woman was interviewed who said, my husband went fishing one morning and he's never come back.
Yeah,
And so this is lawlessness.
it sure
This is
is. Yeah,
lawlessness. And
yeah,
to have politicians like Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz say, well, if they're stopping drugs, I support it wholeheartedly. I mean,
yeah,
something. I mean,
yeah,
the stupid element has just overtaken the Republican Party.
yeah,
And it's just amazing to me how one seriously disturbed, broken individual can so transform a political party. It's amazing to
yeah,
me.
right.
And I need to be careful here because now I'm getting a little animated. But
Yeah,
there is a way, and we've had a way to do our best to curtail drugs coming into this country, and we've had procedures, we've had due process. That's
right,
all being ignored, and innocent
right,
people are dying. I mean, innocent people are being killed.
right. The issue of due process makes it inconvenient for government to be able to do certain things that it wants to do. And that's the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be inconvenient for the
Yeah,
government to be
yeah,
able to do certain things. That's how we protect innocence. That's how we protect overreach. That's how you protect authoritarians from being able to just pull the levers of power whenever they want. And everybody's afraid to speak the truth because they can exercise that power.
yeah,
Yeah, I like it being inconvenient for the government to be able to interdict drugs. I like it to be inconvenient for them to do what they want to do with people that are here illegally. Yeah, I like it to be inconvenient for the government to try to take away my life, liberty, and property,
yeah,
as well as yours.
yeah.
So those are good things, not bad things.
Those are good
When
things,
can
not
be.
bad things. And I understand why some people, particularly in law enforcement, get frustrated because sometimes, there's somebody they really know is guilty. And
Yeah,
because of
right,
the
sure,
constraints of law, there's nothing they can do. And I understand that frustration.
right,
But there's a reason why these rules are in place. John Adams said, and I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but basically what he said was he would rather have 100 guilty people go free if one innocent person is not convicted.
yeah, yeah,
That's what he said.
yeah,
Because again, it's this idea that law is to serve the people, and it is certainly not to convict the innocent.
right.
Um, and we're in a very dangerous time right now, in a very difficult time. And
Yeah.
again, I don't think it gets better for a while.
No, I think you're right. And I would, to anybody who may be more sympathetic to Trump who might be listening to this, the thing that I cannot stress enough, you think this is great now that he's being kind of Rambo tough on this stuff and not observing the law and every aspect and all those kind of things. And that's great because he's getting stuff done. Removing those laws, removing those norms, that may seem great to you now, but what happens in 3 years, 6 years, 7 years, when this guy is no longer president, and now the Democrats get control,
Yeah.
and then those norms and those
Yeah.
guardrails have been gone. Guess who's on the bad side of that picture? These guardrails aren't just because I don't like Donald Trump. The guardrails are there because I think American democracy and what it aspires to be is a really great thing. In trying to protect that, I don't care if it's Democrat or Republican,
That's right.
that those things that are core that have to be protected no matter who's president. And as you said, we have had egregious violations of what we said in our Constitution. And my faithfulness to the United States and my love for the United States is not based on what the United States is, but what it says it aspires to be.
Yeah.
And that's what I continue to work for and to cherish as
Right.
being an American. Yeah,
Right.
right.
Yeah. What if a Democratic president decides to start send guards to abortion clinics where pro-lifers are protesting?
Yeah,
And what happens if they start tear gassing them?
yeah,
right? Like we're getting now with
Right.
the ICE protests.
Yeah.
Um, Conservatives would be losing their minds,
They sure
rightfully
would.
so,
Yeah.
rightfully
And they
so.
would, it should be. Yeah. Right.
Well, that's what's happening now. It's just on the other side, and because you're good with, because it's, something you support, you're okay
Yeah.
with.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, another silly thing I hear from conservatives or Trump supporters, I should say, they're not
Right.
conservatives, is that, and this is the one I love this one. Well, we've got to have some authoritarianism until we can put democracy back on track,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like,
That's
seriously? So what you're basically saying is you only want the kind of democracy that always works for you. That's
right.
not
Yeah.
democracy,
Yeah. Right.
because
Yeah.
in a democracy you have to be willing to lose.
Right. Right.
And as you said, I can lose this year, but 2 years from now we have another chance.
Yeah. Exactly. And you keep
And
making
and
your
you can't,
case.
and you make the argument why we'll be better if we're running the show as opposed to they.
And you
It's the art
persuade
of
people.
persuasion. And then
Yeah.
you let the voters go to the polls and they decide whether you've been persuasive or not.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and so you can't have authoritarianism to set democracy right, because that's not democracy. It's
Yeah.
it's a it's a government rigged in your favor.
Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, and again, I mean, what was I just reading? Ecto Umberto. Do you know him?
No, I don't think so.
He's French, I want to say. He's a commentator, social political commentator. He writes poetry. I mean, he's a polymath kind of guy.
Yeah.
He's got more books. You should see his library in his home. It's just like incredible.
Right.
But he basically said the other day that social media has created, and I'm not going to get this exactly right, but he says social media has created basically a chorus of idiots
Yeah.
in which anybody who thinks they know anything can get on. And,
Yeah.
and that we think that everybody's opinion is equal, right?
Right.
So, and it's where we are, right? I mean, there's always been people who think that, right?
Right.
We all know somebody who thinks they know everything, right?
Right.
But what we've done is now, because of technology, and it's not going away, it's here to stay. But because of
Right.
it, we've given it a platform,
Right.
a big platform. And not all voices, not all, I mean, we're all free to express our opinion, right?
Right. Right.
But not all opinions are equal,
Right.
frankly,
Yeah.
right?
That's right.
My opinion on brain surgery does not matter much compared to a brain surgeon,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, exactly.
And so not all opinions are equal.
Right.
So that's a little
Yeah.
off topic, but
Yeah.
it also contributes to where we are, how people can be so ignorant of due process that
Yeah.
they actually, I mean, they say they believe in due process, but then they want to restrict it. That's not believing in
Yeah.
due process.
Right. And I would just extend this a little bit further since we're not just dealing with politics and American political system, but we're also dealing with theology and what's the Bible and Scripture have to say about this. I think you can make the case that when you look at the Old Testament, you would know more about this than I would, but it's been my reading that when the prophets spoke out against the injustice of the kings, it was largely about due process in a sense. God had laid down the law. There were bribes being given at the city gate. There were wealthy people joining land to land that they were prohibited from joining together. There were all these things: land confiscated, judges being bribed, people not given a fair hearing, people being convicted without two witnesses. Those were the things that the prophets were condemning Israel for. That was 80-90% of the stuff that they railed about when they talked about it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about doing here.
Yeah,
That's
that's
exactly
exactly
what's
right.
going.
You're
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah,
Uh, I've told a couple of people who are friends of mine in conversation that if the prophet Amos were here today, he would be apoplectic
yeah,
over this, and because he talks about this stuff and he names it, and you went
yeah,
down the list.
yeah,
And so, yeah, due process. I would argue that due process comes from Scripture.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah,
Process comes from Scripture. Now, it's not just the Jews. It's not
right.
just the Israelites. You have other law codes. as
Yeah,
well in the ancient
from
Near
other
East.
culture. Yeah,
But
right. Yeah,
what's influenced us
right.
is what we get in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and due process is certainly important to that. So, um, it's interesting because you talked about the divine right of kings earlier. It is kind of interesting that once you get rid of autocracy, I mean, and it's autocracy that impinges upon due process.
Right.
Because
Right.
once the king is right,
Yes.
right, I've had even people say to me, again, it's a stupid interpretation of Romans 13.
Hmm.
I I think Paul is probably in the kingdom just pulling his hair out over
Yeah.
how twisted we've done where we've his Romans passage there. That Donald Trump is president in Romans 13 we said we should obey him. Baloney. That
Yeah.
is not what Romans 13 says.
Right.
Number one. And number two is since Jesus, God doesn't work that way anymore. He doesn't work through nations and kings. So
Right.
God doesn't call kings. He doesn't
Right.
choose presidents. This stuff is God will get whoever God wants is baloney. And
Yeah.
you simply cannot go to the New Testament and get that.
Yeah.
It's not there. Once
Yeah.
you get rid of that idea, now you need this guarantee of due process. And what
Right.
it does is it helps put the brakes on people in power.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the. I'm trying to remember who the. I don't know if I can remember. I'm looking over here at my bookshelf, seeing if I can find the book. I'm not seeing it. But and just summarizing what this author was saying, that he says largely over Western society, the struggle has been that if you have a society that is too centralized in its power and control, then you squelch that culture and that society from being able to grow and to innovate and to be prosperous. However, if you have a society that is too decentralized without any centralized authority, you leave the ability for lawlessness, for gangs,
Yeah.
for rogue individuals to be able to terrorize people, that type of thing. And so the never-ending struggle has been to try to figure out how do you have enough centralized power to keep disorder from happening without it becoming so centralized that it ends up squelching growth and freedom. And that's been our continuous battle through European history, through Western United States history, is trying to figure out how to do that. And at the core of that, as I began this thing, elections, due process, freedom of the press, free speech, those are key pieces that allow us to keep that balance between the two. And it's always a tension.
Yeah.
It's a polarity
Yeah.
that's pulling at both ends. And I think the tendency at one time or another is to start to veer off towards one pole or the other. We're veering towards the centralized control uh, inside of that polarity. I think there will be pull back. I
Yeah.
think that is. I think it's already happening. I
Yeah.
think it's there. Um, how crazy this gets in the short term, in terms of the conflict that develops over that tug of war, who knows how that develops. But I do think that will be the natural pull, is to pull back from that.
Yeah.
Um, but there's we look at the polls. I just encourage people who are watching this who may get discouraged, who may just feel like it's hopeless. I don't think it's hopeless. It's not good, and in the short term, I think there are problems. But I think that Donald Trump is more unpopular than any recent president has ever been,
Yeah.
and it just is a continual notching down. And every step that he takes in these authoritarian moves just ratchets it down one notch further. The economy is sliding. When the economy, I think, begins to really slide, as it already has started, then you have people even more angry about what's happening with the economy. He is headed into a mess, taking the country into a mess that could be something that rivals, I don't be as big as the Great Depression, but something bigger than probably you or I have seen in
Yeah.
our
And yeah.
lifetime. I think that's possible. Um, I hope not, but I think that could be where things go, and that will. I think that triggers a response against the work that they're doing, and there are people organizing. I think on the basis of democracy, on the basis of trying to have the rule of law, trying to reinvigorate those things. So I am not hopeless by any stretch,
Yeah.
but I'm also not. I don't want to say, I hope I'm not being overly optimistic or irrationally optimistic that somehow we're just going to get through this and everybody's, we're all going to be fine. We aren't all going to be fine.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I can't remember if we mentioned this here, but an analogy that I've come up with is talking about getting infected with a virus. When a virus first emerges, like coronavirus, you don't know exactly what its properties are or the course it's going to run. If it were to run without anybody taking any action to prevent it from spreading or be infected, we know what the death rate would be. Often, very quickly, we can figure out how it's going to do. But the reality is, what people are going to do, they're not going to do nothing. They're going to do something.
Yeah.
And so then you have a counterforce that begins to develop, and you begin to work on a vaccine, and you begin to develop. So eventually, the virus then comes back under control. It reaches, but people still die
Yeah.
during the course of that virus. Institutions get disrupted. There's pain and suffering during the middle of that. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that the pain and suffering we're experiencing right now isn't real. I'm not saying it isn't going to get worse, but I do think it ultimately resolves in something. We may be able to build something even better out of the future as people are forced to really come to grips with what's happened and where we're headed.
I think there'll be things that we'll be cleaning up for a long time.
Yes.
And there
Yep.
might be some things that we never clean up,
That's right. That's right.
because it's a lot of destruction. I mean, I have compared the MAGA movement to nihilism, the philosophy of nihilism,
Right.
in which all things, which ultimately nothing matters, in which everything is about destruction. Because when you have a movement that is fueled by hates, what people hate, what they oppose, and not what they really are for,
Right.
all you do is destroy. Stephen Miller's a perfect example of that. You
Yeah.
know, his
Right.
family has already talked about how hateful he is and how he, from early days, hated anyone who wasn't white, and and actually his family, he's Jewish. His family came over here to get away from the Holocaust of all things.
Exactly.
But he
Right.
is so fueled by his hatred for immigrants that all he's doing is destroying. He's just, and so my point to that is, once that's finally over, and once we finally start to get back or go back in the right direction, it's going to take a long time to correct this stuff.
It will. It will. I don't think it's we won't ever go back to being what we were before. We will
Yeah.
be something different. But that's the natural course of human
Yeah.
uh, movement
Yeah.
through time. Um, and we will have lost some things that were good. I would just encourage us to also think that we may be able to even create some things that are even better
Well, that's
in the
true.
process.
That's
We
true.
need
It
to
could
have
come
that
out of
hope
it.
and to work for
Yeah.
that, to pray for
Yeah.
that,
I
to
have said
seek that.
that 20 years from now, if that,
Hmm.
but 20 years from now, I'll be 83, so I don't know if I'll be here or not. But 20 years from now, you're going to have a hard time finding anyone who's going to admit to supporting Donald Trump.
Yeah, right.
And you're going to have people hiding their MAGA hats from their grandchildren.
Yeah, right.
That's how this ends.
Yeah,
There is no world again unless we end up in an authoritarian dictatorship for the next 50 years, there's no way this ends with this being viewed positively.
right,
And people are just not going to want to admit or own up to the fact that they did.
right,
Right.
right.
Uh, so it's kind of where we are. So,
Right.
well, what? Oh, one real quick thing on due process. I remember when Caroline Leavitt, Trump's woefully uh, woefully unprofessional spokesperson
Yes.
uh, talked earlier, and this has been a couple months now, I think, where she actually said that Trump was looking for legal ways to deport citizens if necessary.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Now, that should put fear and trembling into any American.
Right.
That if the government doesn't like your speech, if they don't like your criticism, if they don't like what you've said, that they can actually send you to another country.
Right.
Boy,
Yeah. Yeah.
that that's unthinkable in the Constitution.
Yeah. It is. And so you have in Nazi Germany, you had concentration camps, killing people. This is not to that level, but it's getting right down there with it. The idea
Yeah.
of just shipping you off to some country into some foreign prison
Yeah.
uh, where you disappear.
Yep.
I mean, it's 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 just one step removed from that.
Yeah.
And doing it, you're just out. Basically, you're offshoring and outsourcing your concentration camp.
Yeah.
Is basically what that's
And
talking
we're
about.
doing that now with
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
I remember about 20 years ago, I was in Cuba, and I can remember driving down a road with a friend, a pastor friend there, and we stopped at a spot where there was a long road lined with trees. And he said down that road was a prison camp for dissidents.
yeah,
And he told me at the time, he said, people get taken and they disappear. Nobody knows where they are. That's where they think they go. And I
yeah,
can just remember thinking to myself, how terrible to live in a
yeah,
place where
yeah.
you or your family member can disappear,
Right.
right? And never seen again.
Yeah.
And never even assumed that that would ever come to America.
Right.
And here it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
We've got people disappearing.
You have the first seeds of it. Here it
Yep.
comes. Yeah.
Yep.
So
So,
yeah.
all right. Well, ending on that positive note. Anyway.
Keep hope. Keep
So
hope.
coming up, we got an episode. We just need to say this, that you and I are going to do an episode. Ken Burns is coming out with his
Right.
4-part or 5-part, whatever series on the American Revolution.
Right.
And that's coming up toward the end of this month. So we're going to probably do an episode on that. And
Yeah.
I think that's really it's a little change of pace, but of course, it probably is also very timely.
Yes. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Um, but of course, Ken Burns does the best work. I mean,
Right.
he has got to be one of the most influential American historians in the 20th and 21st century with his work. And
Right.
I just appreciate everything he's done, and everything I've ever watched of his has been just stellar and excellent.
Right.
And so we're going to do an episode once after we watch it. We'll talk about it, and then we'll do an episode, a future episode on the American Revolution.
It'll be great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. So,
Yeah.
all right, friends, there's a preview. All right, so we're at the end here. By the way, before you click out of this thing, please, if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. And if you are listening on podcast, please like us or follow us, whatever they allow you to do. And if you want to leave a comment, and some of you have, we appreciate that. We'll try and respond. Whether you like us or not, we both have been doing stuff for a lot of years. We're used to getting criticized. It's not,
Yes. We.
we are. It's not an issue. Yeah, I've been called some names that I still don't know what they mean. Anyway.
Right.
But anyway, do that, folks. And we just appreciate you being with us. This is Faith Seeking Understanding, and I'm Alan Bevere with Michael Cruz. And the patron saint of Faith Seeking Understanding is Anselm of Canterbury, who said, I do not understand in order to believe, but I believe in order to understand. So, friends, keep seeking.